Hello, and today we're going to return to the Dark Castle, and this time I'm actually going to look at the entire product line with the exception of the sort of mouse mat play mats, because I don't actually own those. So as far as I'm aware, this is everything that currently exists for the Dark Castle. There is a soundtrack as well. Might try and just drop in a little bit of that during this video, just so you get a sample for it. But they've just had a really successful Escape the Dark Sector campaign, which has just finished, so it'll be exciting to look at some of the tactical crunch. But this is where it all started. Now, this game has some fairly simple choices. You pick which character you want to play, you pick who goes into a room first, and then on some of the cards you get to pick either to run away, to hide, to try and get some treasure, or to fight, or fight ferociously. So there's limited choices, but that's the whole point of this. It's a simple, quick, fun game that harks back to the 80s with this dark graphic, and it's very similar to sort of the advanced fighting fantasy style of artwork and the sort of stuff you also got in early White Dwarf. I really like it. It really does hark back to a nostalgic feel. It's not a fantastic game, it's not going to blow you away with amazing tactical choices, but it's a good, solid, fun, quick playing game, and it's got huge replayability, because with all of these cards in here, you're never going to play the same game. Always going to have a slightly different result every single game, and you even shuffle the main boss. And with the addition of this collector's box, you also get to shuffle your starting spots. So lots and lots of variety, lots of replayability within a sort of simple framework. What's not to love? Anyway, let's have a quick peek at the books, then sort of the core book and the collectors, then the expansions, and that should give you a good look. So warning, there are spoilers in this video. In the original game, you got the pad and the pencils to track your life, but with the collector's box you get this little pack with skulls to track your health, and they move along there. I quite like them. In some ways the pad might still be necessary for some of the expansions, but yeah, it's a nice little addition. Now, originally you had just the base game. You could also obviously get the collector's box, and then you got the different expansion packs, which are out of order. Shocker, let's get them in the right order. So, the Death Knight, the Undead Queen, and then the Blight of the Plague Lord. But there's also these two extra books. So, Tales from the Dark is just sort of short story, so it's not really that necessary. But the Death book's quite good. Let's just spoil one of them. So, if you die to card DCA1CH10, then you'd read this section on page 63. The reptilian takes hold of you and throws itself into the rushing river of filth below. You hit the water hard, thrashing helplessly as you are rolled over and over, tightly constricted by the claws, spines and jaws of the water beast. In a few terrifying moments you are crushed, drowned and dragged under, disappearing below the unending torrent of sewage. Without you, the rest of your party soon overcome by the forces of darkness and slaughtered. Long after your mortal frames have rotted away, your spirits live on, tortured souls doomed forever to haunt the castle passages, never finding peace. Your adventure ends here. Yes, that's nice and suitably grim, but pretty much every single card has an entry in the Death Book. It's a really great addition, really adds to the flavour. But it's a little bit grim. If you're playing with young children, maybe skip the Death Book. Okay, so briefly going through the rulebook. It's only about 10 pages, it's not very complex. So you've got a bit talking about what comes in the game, how to set it up. This is a really important bit. So you've got might, cunning and wisdom. So that's what those symbols mean. How to play the game, how to fight, what to do if you defeat an enemy, various combat specials, and some rules on solo play. And that's pretty much it. So it's a really, really lightweight game. You can mix it up a bit with this supplementary rulebook here. So you can check out the contents. You can get character flaws, which is a sort of fun addition. You've got the death dice, which I'm not sure why you'd want to make the game harder, but maybe you do. Split doubles, these are really cool. Just give you certain extra options. There are a couple of cards where it says you can't use the death dice, and then it talks a bit about some of the start cards, the bosses, the epilogues, the living stone, the U token, health trackers, etc. So yeah, that's pretty cool. The Death Knight. So, got a nice little bit of info about what the Death Knight is. So, you've got your 3 character cards, your 15 chapter cards, your dice, your curses, and the boss card. And this is where you get marked for death. And the curses are sort of what makes this slightly unique. So, it talks about mark for death and the cult dice. So, yeah, that's an interesting little add-on. So, when a character is marked for death and takes damage from a cultist, which is identified by the special symbol, they lose an additional 1 hit point. So being marked for death makes you more likely to die. So Scourge of the Undead Queen, this is all sort of undeady stuff, obviously. So again, nice little intro blurb, the bits and pieces. So you've got companions rather than characters in this one. A new boss, obviously, how to create your adventure. So how your companions work, some special abilities which only trigger off explosion rolls, using companions as players, and then the ritual chalice and the spell book. So again, a nice little tweak, and then on the back, some nice options here. So obliterate, revive, and manipulate. So that's going to be quite important when facing, I think it's actually the Queen. I haven't really played the Queen. I played a little bit of the Death Knight. And then this newest one here, the Plague Lord. Again, nice little bit of intro. Your new characters. The Plague cards are what makes this thing unique. So lots of people with Plague carriers. So your Plague threshold, rolling for the Plague, combating a carrier. What happens if you take items from a carrier? And then your new characters with splits, specialties, and the knapsack. So yeah, this is a fun one, and I really need to get that one to the table as well. And then obviously you've seen the death book and all that, and then we just pop it back in here and it covers up nicely, keeping nice and secure the skulls. And yeah, that's a really nice little addition to get all of those expansions. So anyway, let's have a quick look at the cards. Okay, so what we got here is the original base set plus the collector's box. So we've now got 3 starting locations. We have multiple bosses here. I want to say 15 off the top of my head. And obviously you've got, you know, the really horrible triggers that they do. Just to give you the anatomy of the card, there's normally a picture, a little bit of flavor text, some special text. If there's combat, these are the dice you effectively roll, and this is the damage that particular person does. So for here, effectively they've rolled an eye, 3 stars, and then you roll a dice per player. So if there's 3 players, you'd roll an additional 3 dice. So a bit of a difficult task taking down the boss, and they're doing you 3 damage a turn. So yeah, that can be pretty tough. And then you've got your main adventure deck. As you can see, it's huge, but you're only going to take like 15 of these cards. And then let's say this is the deck. I do deal with my adventure begins, then I go into the thing and I pick who's going to go in first. So let's say it's me, so I flip it over without warning, all the bats swarm past and you roll to see if you lose hit points. Nothing particularly happens, so okay, great, let's go to the next room, flip it over, and you, so that's me, I'm the person who went into the room, are incapacitated, and basically everyone else has now got a roll to try and free me. If they don't, I lose hit points. So, okay, I've lost some hit points, so now Tim, let's say, is going to go into the room. So Tim goes into the room, and we can flee, which we're going to lose 2 hit points, or we can begin combat, and whoever deals the final blow takes 1 hit point of damage as it bursts into flames. So yeah, there you go. So next person, let's say it's Jenny. She goes in, she gets to draw an item card, and then we'd have to move it around if Jenny's hands are full. Eventually, we've gone through all of those cards, assuming we've survived, we then face one of the bosses, and if we beat the boss, then we escape. If at any time any player dies, the game is over. Anytime you defeat an enemy or get told to draw an item card, you'll draw from this deck here, and that's a collector's box thing, and that's the Living Stone, throwback to Ian Livingstone, who helped create the Advanced Fighting Fantasy games. Anyway, so Warped Cudgel, this is a more typical thing. It's a one-handed weapon. Once per round of combat, when you roll a might symbol, that's the fist, you may roll again and choose which of the 2 results apply. So that's really good in combat. And there's loads of other cards. Here you go, we've got a Cunning Concoction. Discard to apply a single cunning at any times. And this is where the game's a bit of a problem, because it says the word cunning and it says the word might, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what those symbols mean except in the rulebook, so that can be a bit of a problem for new players. And then here's another good one to get. Discard to restore 2 hit points to your character. So yeah, and there's lots of these cards, as you can see. They're often not very good, you know, partially rotten apple, discard to restore 1 hit point. But these are essential, I think, to getting through the game and knowing who to give what and when to use them, particularly things like rotting apple. Often, you know, if you're injured and you draw a card that says heal, you just eat it instantly, because you never know, you might come across another character in the game who says, right, if you've got any food items, that they disappear and stuff like that, so that could be really bad. Now in the collector's box you get these cards, which I think are really, really useful, because as you can see, it finally gives you something to remind you what might, cunning and wisdom look like, what this symbol means, etc. So that's a really handy little reference card, and these cards are double-sided. So rules to remember, so yeah, it's really, really good. Victory and defeat, you get to read the relevant bits, and then these are the character flaws. So for example, this character is desperate. Once per game, after rolling your character die, you may change it to show a result of your choice before applying it. So although they're called character flaws, they're not always, you know, flaws. They can actually be quite useful. It'd be interesting to see if they bring out an expansion that ties into character flaws. So it says, if you're a desperate character, you must do this. So that could be quite cool. So anyway, I think the collector's box, bringing these cards to the mix, is actually a really big deal. Maybe not so much these, but the little reference cards and the flaws. Obviously you can potentially just print out these yourself. They don't need to be cards, but yeah, they're excellent little addition. Now in the collector's box you get this little bag as well, which I use to store the dice, and these black dice are the ones that the baddies roll. If you've got the Golden Axe Kickstarter expansion, you get this little gold dice, but then each character has their own dice, so the smith, the tanner, the miller, etc. Now the final bit I think I need to show you from the collector's box are these extra dice. So you've got the various jewel symbols, if I can find them all. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so you've got the various bits. You've got this dice here, which 3 hit points, stone or death, and then a U marker. It's a nice little addition. I'm not sure about these. Totally unnecessary, but a nice little thing to have, and it's got some nice sort of detail. The final element of the base game, of course, was the original 6 characters of the cook, the abbot, the miller, the smith, the tailor, and the tanner. Now, the first expansion was the Death Knight, which is a pretty mean character to face. He does you 3 damage, and he likes people marked for death. And you got the mason, the hunter, and the bishop, which slightly mixes up the character combinations for might, wisdom, and cunning. Then, of course, you had lots of different weird funky characters, and yeah, some nice encounters. So there you go, marked for death. And if you're wondering if you've got the right cards, there's this tiny little number. I'm not sure if it's going to show up. Let's see. Yeah, if you see this tiny little number here, that identifies the particular card. And yeah, loads of really cool characters, and yeah, really nasty. Slightly harder than the base game, I think, and of course you can mix these into the deck, or I suppose you could potentially just play with this deck, which is what I plan on doing for all the expansions. You know, I play with just the cards that come with the deck. The disadvantage of doing that potentially is sometimes these can have quite a lot of fighty guys and not so much sort of the just random rooms where you get to choose to do something. Let's see, levels 1, like this one here, where you can choose to oh no, actually that one you can't choose, you have to roll, but there you go. So that is the Death Knight expansion. Now, as part of the Death Knight expansion, obviously you get your hunter, your mason, and your bishop, and then you get this little mark for death dice as well. And yeah, that was the contents of that. What we're going to look at now is the next expansion, which was the Undead Queen, who came with companions. Now the companions are pretty cool. So you've got the Spirit of the First Prisoner, the Defecting Guard, and then the Witch Hunter with their corresponding dice. And as you can see, you can play them with various bits, and they've got this special ability. So when you roll the boom symbol, then you can use their special ability. And you've also got this extra sort of weird magic dice, which has a death head on, which doesn't look good, does it? But yeah, these are pretty cool. I like them. And then of course you've got your sort of undead focused baddies and rooms, etc. And there's quite a few cards in this expansion, so I mean he's a bit of a beastie. Look at that, 3 damage if you rush in, but 2 damage if you carefully take your time. So there you go. And then here's a pretty cool room. It's blocked. You can nominate 2 players to reach in and try and deal with it. Then you've got your skeletons and wights and all that sort of stuff. And then here is a nice one where not much goes on and you draw 2 item cards. So that's pretty cool. And I think the game could do with some more of these sort of nice benefactory cards, so it doesn't become too tricksy. Anyway, so there you go. That's the Undead Queen. I think this dice can really muck you up quite badly, and obviously different people have different abilities that trigger potentially off this. Yeah, and there's some really cool artwork in this expansion. Then yeah, this nice thing. So open your soul to the gatekeeper, try and roll wisdom, and yeah, really cool. Anyway, there you go, that's that one. Then we got the final expansion, the Plague Lord, which gave us the Butcher, the Shepherd, and the Fletcher. And again, this is all sort of about plaguey stuff. And we've got dice, so the Butcher, the Fletcher, the Shepherd, and then this sort of plaguey dice. And as you can see, we've got these sort of necrotic, kind of orky type guys. Yeah, some really, lots of vermin. I quite like this expansion. I really like the addition of these special rooms, a plague doctor. Yeah, really nice. Probably my favourite expansion, I think. And then this card looks really good when coloured. Someone did that on Board Game Geek. Really nice. But yeah, there you go. So that's all of those. Let's have a look at the items you get with all these expansions. So here we go. We've got the 3 extra items. Now, these items are actually the Mark for Death curses, and they are several. So Accelerated Decay, Crippling Injury, Temporal Vortex, Rest of Spirit, Marked for Death. So yeah, these are what make the Death Knight expansion pretty tricksy. If you get one of these, you could be in all sorts of bother. So watch out for these. So let's just look at Accelerated Decay, shall we? So when this card is drawn, place it to one side and finish drawing the number of item cards dictated by the chapter card. Then apply this curse. All items just drawn crumble to dust. Discard them now along with this card. Yay! So yeah, these are really nasty. So that's the first expansion. Hopefully this is the second expansion. So you've got the Crumbling Spellbook, the Ritual Chalice, and then these various events that happen to your companion. So you can gain the Witch Hunter, the Defecting Guard, or the First Prisoner. So that's a really cool way of getting those cool characters who do potentially disappear. So that's a really nice addition. And then finally, quite a thick one here. This is giving you some actually useful items. But then, Plague. Oh dear, and there's several Plague cards, 4 I think. So, Plague cards. You begin to feel weak and feverish. You notice a dark abscess forming on your wrist. There is a sharp pain in your abdomen and you fall forward coughing up thick black bile. Roll for Plague. And yeah, they're all pretty much the same. Yeah, they are identical. I was just checking. I couldn't remember if they had variation. So there you go, that's a look at all of Escape the Dark Castle. Now, if you're careful with packing stuff away here, it does go in, but as I say, this bit is a little bit tight. There's loads of room over here, so that's good. The dice you can just put in this pocket. So the core set and the collector's set you put here, and new expansions you can break out separately, and then you've got these extra cards here which I guess are meant to go in here, but I just put them in a little baggie and I normally store them in this pocket here. The books sit nicely in here. So yeah, it's a great way to get everything in one box, although I do wonder if you're better off keeping them in the individual boxes, because there's so much gameplay in just the base box that I haven't really played the expansions too much, so I can't comment on them too deeply. I did have a little bit of a dabble with each of them, and they do bring something new, a bit of fresh variety. So once you've exhausted playing this and you've seen absolutely every single card, you might be looking for some extra stuff. But to be honest, you know, with 15 cards being drawn out of all of this pool here, there's so much replayability in the base box. If you're not sure if you're going to like this, just buy the base box. So there you go. Hope you've enjoyed a slightly more in-depth look at the Escape the Dark Castle collection, and yeah, a little bit more spoilers in this video. It's going to be interesting to see how this game compares to Escape the Dark Sector. I think this is so basic it's going to be easier to get people into playing it. Escape the Dark Sector has a little bit more tactical choice, a little bit more thinking. It maybe is going to be better for gamers, but not so suitable as a sort of a gateway game. This has proved very popular with my other half because it's just a lightweight bit of fun. You can play under an hour, and yeah, it's a great little game. Until the next video, happy gaming.